Let's go ahead and start our software demo with our new parametric seams feature. We're starting with a denim dress and jacket. You can see it's almost complete and is showcasing many details, including realistic seams. Let's see the details in our V-Ray Ray Trace window. You can see close up how realistic the seams are. They even include slight puckering and three-dimensional thread, just like real life. Now, with the 2020 January edition, everyone can achieve such results without the need to be an advanced user. All it takes is a few simple clicks. In addition to the improved visual realism to our seams, you'll notice that we also took extra care to present our seam parameters with industry standard units and terminology. Not only does this give you complete flexibility as you're building your seams, but it makes the transition from 2D or physical to a 3D workflow as seamless as possible. First of all, we added new seam presets to give you a more accurate and consistent starting point. We'll start with the single needle preset and assign it to the hem of the skirt. Then we'll change the color of the seam to yellow. All of the seams Browseware provides in the presets are vector files, which is also a new capability in 2020 January edition. This gives you a lot of power and flexibility, which we'll cover later in the webinar, so stay tuned. You can see after we assign the single needle to the hem, it's positioned very close to the edge. Instead of changing the crop area of the seam image as we used to do, there are now new options in the context view under the workmanship section. We can edit here both the seam properties and the thread properties. Let's change the distance between the hem edge and the seam using the offset field. You can see the change immediately in 2D and 3D. I can also change it to be a double needle in one click by editing the lines count value. The distance between the stitch lines is too narrow for my liking. I'd like to make it a 6mm gauge seam. I can edit the distance field to 0.6 centimeters. Great, I'm happy with the seam properties. Now let's review the thread properties. The thread length is defined with industry standard units, the number of stitch repeats in 1 inch, SPI, or the number of stitch repeats in 1 centimeter, SPC. Let's change it and view the difference. The system will remember the last selection for the units, meaning that if you get a file from another user who likes to use SPI, but you prefer to view SPC, when you open their file, the system will convert and display the thread length value in SPC. Let's move on to the width. The width defines the stitch image height. This is great for seam types like zigzag or lace. We'll keep it as is since I'm happy with the height of our current stitch. The space parameter defines the space between the threads. The space allows you to create embroidery stitch effects. Let's change the value just to see the result. Now let's change the thread thickness to 0.3 centimeters. The thickness has different unit type options that are used in the industry: text, ticket, metric, denier, and centimeters. Note that the thickness option is only available for vector seam images. The thickness parameter controls the stroke size of the vector seam, just like you would do in Adobe Illustrator. But now you don't need to go back and forth between Illustrator and Browseware. You can adjust the thickness directly in VStitcher or Lotta. 3D thickness is a legacy option previously called seam thickness. You can still use it, and we kept it especially for existing garments to keep their integrity and backward compatibility. I will keep it at 0 for this seam. Now that we've finished reviewing and adjusting the seam parameters, let's assign it to the rest of the skirt. Now that I'm reviewing the back of the seam, I can see that it needs to be adjusted. There should be loopers on the back side of the seam. Do note that if I select the double needle preset from the beginning, the backside loopers are already correct for that stitch type. We're going to continue showing this manual way of adjustment to show the flexibility of the new seam features. Since I created this double needle from the single needle preset, I'll manually import the looper image for the backside of the seam. We can do this with the replace image method you're already familiar with. The backside loopers image we've chosen is intentionally too large, so we can demonstrate the adjustments to match it to the front double needle. We'll start by changing the lines count to 1. Next, we'll look at the thread. There's an option to link and unlink the width and length parameters. In this case, we want them linked so they'll scale together. We'll change the width to 0.6 centimeters to match the face stitching. Good, I'm happy with the result. Another very exciting new feature is the capability to auto-generate depth maps for your seams. We understand that the creation of normal and displacement maps, which are responsible for the very realistic look and feel of seams and artworks, is not a simple task, and many users aren't yet utilizing the power of these maps. That's why we created this option. If the check mark for auto-generate depth maps is selected, the system automatically generates depth maps for you, even continuing to update them with any changes you might make to the seam parameters. This option is selected by default for vector seams or edge assignable trims, and of course you can change it as you wish. Note that the option is available for both vector and raster materials. The values or the strength of the normal and displacement maps are also editable. In case you want to create your own depth maps, you can just clear the check mark and add your own maps. You can use a combination of your own custom normal map with a system auto-generated displacement map, or the other way around. This workflow is flexible to meet your needs. The skirt hem seam application looks great, but we can see that the dress has more details, like the three-dimensional seam construction as well as the puckering effect. Let's see how these were created. We'll start with the 3D stitch construction. This feature will give a realistic look to the seam join depending on the finish of the seam allowance. Once you select an existing stitch using the stitch tool, you'll see the new stitch construction section in the context view. The armhole edge, for example, is stitched to the sleeve cap using the multi-stitch function. To update the 3D stitch construction, I just need to select one of the stitches and apply my desired setting. The setting is applied to all connected stitches within the multi-stitch. The stitch construction section is also available when you use the select tool to select an edge or an internal line. This means you have the flexibility to choose when in the process the stitch construction is defined, or by whom. For example, it might be set by a pattern maker or technical designer while they initially stitch the garment, or it could be set later in the process by the designer in VStitcher or Lotta while working on new design lines, graphics, or colorways. It's entirely up to you. Once you select a stitch, you can choose one of the 3 available stitch construction types: flat seam, open seam, or directional seam. The flat setting will not produce any shadow effect on the join between the 2 edges. If the seam allowance is pressed open, it will create a uniform shadow effect to the seam join. This is reflected in our open seam setting. If the seam allowance is pressed to one side, it will create a more pronounced bump, or shadow, on one side of the seam. This is the effect our directional seam setting will emulate. Since it is possible to access the stitch construction with the Select tool, we also have added visual feedback to the 2D window to remind you of the stitch or stitches connected to your selection. We've selected an edge that's part of a multi-stitch. You can see in our 2D window that nothing is changed until we select one of the parameters within stitch construction, and then all related stitches are displayed to remind us of the additional edges that will be affected by our setting. And now we'll take a look in V-Ray. Great, it looks nice. Now let us show you 2 more effects that add realism to the stitches: the puckering and wash effects. Once the puckering option is selected, you can edit its depth and width, which allows different kinds of appearance. The depth controls the height of the puckering. The width controls the distance of the puckering from the edge. The wash effect is useful for denim or other garment wash products where the washing process produces a slight visual fading or discoloration along the seams. It's that simple. Now let me show you a very short but powerful workflow that summarizes the features we just reviewed. I have a 2D vector seam library in Illustrator format from my existing 2D workflow. I selected from my library one 2D seam repeat that I would like to use in VStitcher. With the new vector capabilities of the 2020 January edition, I can edit, recolor, change thickness, and create a completely realistic look for this seam right inside VStitcher. Let's take a look. The Illustrator vector seam allows us to be flexible. We can easily change the color and all the seam and thread properties as shown earlier. We can even change the stroke thickness. Because the file is vector format, we're able to keep a high resolution. We're utilizing the auto-generate depth map setting to easily give this seam a 3-dimensional realism. We prepared in advance a special tech pack where we changed the garment to be white with thick black seams, and that created a nice schematic technical drawing effect. Just another idea of how to utilize the new seams features. You can see the endless flexibility available in VStitcher and Lotta just waiting for you to use. Whether it's realistic 3D seams and stitch construction to enhance your presentations and showcasing workflow, or whether it's more accurate and precise methodology to communicate seams and stitch constructions to the vendor as part of your manufacturing pipeline, it's really all in your control. Great, let's begin our second demo. With this demo, we'll be reviewing some exciting updates to our zipper feature, as well as the V-Ray Ray Trace window. This outfit is looking really nice, and we're going to add a zipper to the center front for a finishing touch. This is a great opportunity to introduce everyone to our collaboration with YKK. We are very pleased to announce that we now have a collection of YKK zippers in our Browseware Cloud library. This is an online collection we will continue to update with new zippers, so please make sure to check back and see what has been added. These zippers are all true to life, meaning you can order the exact zippers from YKK and use them on your physical garments. Currently, in the YKK library, you can find 3 zipper coil types: metal, coil, and Vislon, in 2 sizes, number 3 and number 5. Also, you can see various zipper sliders. And this is just a small sample as a start. We'll go ahead and download a zipper to our garment, number 5 Vislon and a Vislon slider. We'll assign the Vislon zipper to the coat, and later we'll decide which one of the sliders we prefer. You can see that once I select a zipper with the Assign tool, there's a new checkbox on the horizontal contextual menu named Manual Assignment. Once checked, you'll have an alternate way to assign your zipper: manual mode in addition to automatic mode. The manual mode gives you full control over which edges or internal lines are assigned with the zipper, while the automatic mode auto-detects the stitched edges and auto-assigns the zipper in one click. Let's review the manual assignment mode. When you hover over the first edge, you'll see the arrow previewing the direction of the multi-stitch zipper assignment. If you would like the arrow to point the other direction, just slide your mouse along the edge until the arrow adjusts. Click to select the line and confirm the arrow direction. Now click to select all edges the zipper should be assigned to. Once you finish with the edges in the From section, switch into the To section and select the corresponding edges in the same direction or order. Notice the manual assignment mode is available in 3 places within the interface: the horizontal context view, the right side context view, as well as the right-click menu. This garment is a great example of a use case for the manual assignment feature. It has a pleat construction coming into the center front zipper edge. With the manual control over the zipper, you can now easily skip the pleat fold. Now let's match the zipper color to the coat color. We've already saved a custom color in our palette. And we'll replace the zipper puller with the new one we downloaded to see which one we prefer. We can simply drag and drop the new puller into the zipper object, then specify which part should be replaced. The zipper tape looks a bit too wide, so let's narrow it to 1 centimeter. Very nice. Now, we'll add stitch construction to the zipper edges to increase the visual realism. Remembering from our previous demo, we just need to select one segment sewing into the zipper, and the rest of the multi-stitch will inherit our chosen setting. Great, my outfit is complete. Next, we'll talk about our V-Ray renderer. We've really optimized and improved the efficiency of V-Ray in this release. Now it has even better results and in less render time. We've also added the ability for the user to control the quality of the render. This option is visible in the render window when your rendering preference is set to V-Ray. You can see the differences between a render that was set to low versus a render that was set to best. As the vertical bar slides across the image, it's transitioning between a low quality and best quality image. The low quality took about 60 seconds to render, while the best quality took about double the render time. Low is useful when you want to quickly export a render just to see that your composition and lighting are fine. The image will have some noise or graininess to it. Medium is equal to the quality we had in August edition. The image will look clearer, but still with some amount of noise in the shadow areas. This option tries to balance the image quality and the render time. High and best are focused on image quality, with less regard for the time taken. These options will result in very clear renders, but might take more time depending on the specifications of your computer. What's nice about the different render qualities is I can experiment and check my settings in a short amount of time using low quality, and only later, when I know my settings are correct, render the high quality result. We are always trying to help improve our users' efficiency, whether by enhancing the user experience, making day-to-day tasks simpler and faster, or by improving performance and speed. Hopefully you will enjoy this release as much as we are. Let's get started with our third and final demo. Here we will be showcasing new functionality related to our avatars, artwork, and 3D exports. We are in the process of designing new leggings. Before getting too far with the garment, we want to create some reference marks on the avatar, as well as measure her using the improved 3D measure tape. You can still find this icon on the upper left side of the 3D window. In order to create a new measurement, we can click the plus button and type a new name for the measure tape. You can see at the bottom of the 3D window, a tooltip reminder is displayed to help guide the measuring actions. Holding Control or Command and left mouse click, I can add a point. Let's add a measurement in the waist area. There are now 4 measurement methods available to measure the avatar, and we'll review each one. For the waist, we'll use the new circumference measurement. After a single click on the avatar's body, a circumference guideline is created. What a great update, so simple. You can see the 3D measurements are now displayed as pink lines, and a 3D gizmo has been added that allows you to move and rotate the measurement. Let's make the circumference measurement parallel to the floor. To do this, we can hold Control or Command and right mouse click, as mentioned at the tooltip at the bottom of the 3D window. We also have the ability to use an existing 3D measure tape as a permanent reference mark on the avatar. You can set that by selecting the checkbox in the Always Show column. You can now see the marking even when the avatar is dressed and the 3D measurements window is closed. Let's review the rest of the measurement methods. We will now measure the avatar's outseam from the waist down to the feet using the 3 other options. Let's start with the tape method. You can see that the top part of the measurement runs along the surface of the hip and then transitions to a straight line between the thigh and the calf, the same behavior as a physical measuring tape. The next measurement option we'll review is the surface method. You can see that the measurement line continues along the surface of the body from start to end. This is a good opportunity to show our improved functionality around adding points. We add a point by holding Control and clicking on the measurement line. We can then select the point just with our left mouse button and move it to our desired location. To remove the point, we can hold Control and click on the existing point. We'll go ahead and save this measurement. The last measurement method is straight. You can see that the measurement line is created completely straight and into or through the body. The straight measurement type creates the shortest straight line between the points. Now that we understand all the types of measure modes and the reference marking, we'll add a low waist measurement using the circumference measure method. We'll use the gizmo to rotate the measurement so the back will be a little bit higher than the front. We can always turn on and off, showing the measurements as reference marking on the avatar. And now you can also easily share your avatar measurements with your colleagues by exporting them as a preset file. The file extension will be VSM, and then your colleague can import that file. We are showing an import of measurements now. Do note that you can only share avatar measurements between the same base avatar body. Great, now let's continue working on the leggings. Before I dress the avatar, I'll make the fabric a bit transparent so we can see the avatar reference markings. We can clearly see the waistline is too low, and we need to adjust the pattern in order to match the target waist position. We'll use the slide function to increase the rise, which allows us to follow the existing pattern shape and get closer to the high waist reference marking. That looks great. Let's bring the legging fabric back to its full opacity. Now we'll dress the hoodie and look at some updates to our artwork workflow. The artwork in the back looks a bit dull. First, we'll change its color. We can add our Pantone library for the current season. And we'll change the color to green. The vector artwork color chip now contains the Pantone number, or the color library name, which will also be included in the TechPack export. But actually, I don't really think the green matches. So I think we'll change the artwork to have an embossed effect, instead of printed, so the artwork maintains the same fabric texture and color as the base fabric. To do this, we'll change the artwork color to white, the material blending mode to multiply, and we'll set the displacement depth. Since we're editing the displacement map, we'll see a preview in V-Ray to make sure we're happy with the height of the embossed effect. This looks great, and is also a good time to mention that we now support 16-bit displacement maps. This means that the quality and detail level possible utilizing our displacement map feature has drastically improved. You will now be able to replicate small details and maintain great quality. You can see an example of this in the small rubber injection printed logo on our hoodie pocket. Now that the outfit is ready, I want to give the avatar a more natural pose. Let's see what poses we have for this avatar. As you can see, instead of just a list of poses, we have a new drop-down menu with preview images, and the ability to go from grid view to a list view, and even search for poses. I'll search for the pose dressing casual. This is nice, but I think her hands need to move a bit farther from the body. We're excited to show you that in 2020 January edition, we now have the ability to manually adjust the avatar's poses. The poses are editable for all avatars with skeleton, and that includes either Browseware's parametric avatars or your own imported avatars. Let us show you how easy it is. When you're adding a new pose or editing an existing pose, you'll see the avatar's skeleton, which is built from bones and joints. In order to edit the pose, I need to select a joint, or red dot, and then rotate it. If I click on a bone, it will select the upper joint that's connected to it. Using the gizmo, we'll move the hand a bit farther from the body. Then we can save the pose and dress the avatar. You can see how smoothly the avatar is transitioning from casual to the new pose. Great, love it. Now let's discuss the updates we've made in our 3D export settings. We heard your feedback and we've made some major improvements so the 3D export process will be more flexible and easy to understand. You'll notice a lot of new configuration options that allow you to export exactly what you need for your existing 3D pipeline or to integrate the output with third-party applications for e-com, virtual stores, and more. You can see we've reorganized the export settings into clear sections, and we'll quickly review each one. The Avatar section allows you to choose if you want the avatar to be included in your exported 3D object. The Geometry settings allow you to control the number of polygons, which affects the size of the file, as well as the number of parts that make up the 3D object's geometry. You can uncheck the garment inside and garment thickness to reduce the amount of polygons being exported. Also, you can choose the scale of the geometry. We recommend keeping it at 1, which is now the default option. The Texture section controls the texture images exported with your 3D model. You have 2 options to choose from. Baked textures will combine all materials within one pattern piece into a single texture. For example, for this garment, all of the hoodie front piece materials, including fabrics, seams, and artworks, are combined into one texture. You can also choose if the texture files will be exported as PNG or TIFF. The Original Textures option keeps the textures in a tiled manner as they are being displayed inside VStitcher and Lotta. We recommend using the Baked Textures option as it will export fewer texture files and is compatible with more third-party 3D software. Lastly, in the Texture section, you have the ability to control the resolution or quality of the texture being exported, either via DPI or pixels. The UV section determines how the textures are mapped on top of the geometry. This is a well-known process for 3D artists and an important one, as the different options produce different results in third-party software. You can see that there are 2 behaviors to choose from. The option for single UV layout per piece means each pattern piece in your file has a dedicated UV. This option will provide a higher quality texture and more flexibility, but will also create a larger file that may not be optimal for web and/or VR viewing. The single UV layout for all pieces option means there's only one UV which contains all your pieces. This option produces a smaller file and will be more compatible for web or VR viewing. The FBX settings section is also new and gives options to set the FBX version and type. The 3D object itself, once exported, has also been cleaned up and unified. If you view the model in a third-party 3D software, we are using Blender here, you can see the names of the geometry, and materials now match the piece names and material names from VStitcher and Lotta. This makes it easy to identify if the geometry is from the inside, outside, or thickness of the garment, or if the object is a fabric, trim, or an artwork. Also, we consolidated material shaders so all pattern pieces with the same fabric assigned to them in VStitcher or Lotta now have one material shader assigned to them in the exported 3D object. And we will finish the webinar by revealing a new integration with a 3D file format called GLTF. GLTF is quickly being adopted as a new standard file format for showcasing 3D objects on the web and mobile browsers, as well as being used for integration into VR and AR. The format also supports PBR natively to provide the best quality. We are proud to be the first 3D fashion software to support this file format. You'll now see GLTF as an option in the 3D format dropdown. Once selected, you have similar options as what we reviewed for FBX. The major difference is that GLTF file type always uses baked textures, since the file format is lightweight and meant for use in web applications and mobile browsers. In the GLTF settings section, you can choose if you want the JSON-based GLTF file format or the binary-based GLB file format. Once exported, you can upload the GLTF file into one of our supported GLTF viewers without needing to adjust the object in a third-party 3D software. We are showing the exported 3D object on the Sketchfab website here. You can see clearly all the details and the PBR materials. This is impressive. You can also use the GLTF output in the Kronos viewer. This viewer is free to use and customizable for implementation in your workflow. The new 2020 January edition closes the gap between the virtual and physical worlds even further by introducing previously unavailable realism and by adding digital versions of real-world workflows that can now be done with a single click. We are so excited for you to try it out, and as always, we're looking forward to hearing your feedback.